Hello and welcome to the Bird's Eye View podcast. I am your host, Jori Negin-Shecter, joined today by a very special guest, a friend of the program, Sportsnet 590 The Fan's very own Show Ali. Show, thank you for taking the time, and what a time to be joining us. The Blue Jays are maybe showing some signs of life.
It's true. They really are, Jory. I have to say, after watching like 100 plus games of this team's offense throughout the entire season, having them then win 10 of 14 games, I guess 10 of 15, wrapping up the Red Sox series, but still 10 of 15 is something I didn't really expect because of the way they're winning these games, if that makes sense. I mean, they're doing the little things right. They're passing the baton. The defense looks pretty good. It's a lot of baseball and a lot of winning that we haven't seen them do in the entire season, at the very least for this extended period of time.
It looks like the Blue Jays of last year in some respects, which is really saying something because of where they kind of were coming from. I guess we'll kind of go through the whole series, kind of just on the whole, and then obviously look ahead. But I mean, just from your perspective, the biggest difference in this series, I mean, what did you see?
I think with the Red Sox series, we did see the offense. They ground out more competitive ABs. And again, I mean, Peyton Tolley made a lot of them look really silly, no question. But even against a Ranger Suarez, who again is one of the better pitchers in baseball, he definitely made their jobs a lot harder. They still managed to get him out of the game before he could, get another quality start, for example. They were grinding. It just felt, I think the biggest difference with the Red Sox series and basically all the other series prior, at the very least for most of it, was that it did feel like these are teams that, especially the Red Sox being on this monster hot streak, that can really put you down in order. And the Blue Jays bats looked like they were a little looser. They were taking more confidently. It all felt different than those APs where they go up, they swing once or twice, and it's a pop out or it's a ground out to short or what have you. So yeah, that I can't quite put my finger on why they would have flipped that switch. Maybe it's simply because post deadline they know these are your guys. Like this is the clubhouse, this is the locker room we have for the rest of the season, come what may. And maybe that's a part of it. Maybe some of the guys felt a little more rejuvenated. Obviously, you need to see more from Vladdy. You need to see more from Kirk. Although Kirk's been good, he was good during the Red Sox series. You need to see a little more from Springer, of course. But yeah, I think you're also getting contributions from basically everyone up and down the lineup. I mean, how many times in the last week have we talked about, an Andres Jimenez or a Nathan Lucas or a Miles Straw even?
Yeah, it's been up and down the lineup, like you kind of said. There was the Nathan Lucas game against, I guess it was the Phillies. I mean, this is a team that's won 5 series in a row now. Like they seem to be coming alive at the right time. So, where are we at on this team? Is this a team that's got a genuine shot here to maybe sneak into the postseason?
I think as the Red Sox series ended, I think because the Rangers had also lost, so it's probably like a 2 game, 2.5 game. Actually, I'm not sure if the Rangers lost last night. They were losing last I checked. But anyways, the idea that they're 2.5 games back of the final wild card spot, the Tigers, the Twins, the Rangers, they're all kind of in that mix. But that prior to this 10 of 15 stretch, they had 6 teams to jump, and now you only have 3 teams to jump, maybe 2 teams. That gives me a lot more confidence. Now I'll say this: I do think I will fully be on the bandwagon for them making the playoffs if they can come out of this stretch. So 6 games against the Yankees and 3 against the Rays. If they can come out of this stretch, Yankees, Rays, Yankees, and still be kind of where they are, if not better, but still at the worst, be 2.5 games, 3 games out of a playoff spot after playing the Yankees and Rays back to back to back, then I think I'll be more ready to believe, if that makes sense, that they are capable of making the playoffs. I think after the last Yankee series, they still have to play. There's the Mariners, the Tigers, the Orioles. Like you're going to play some of these teams that you're directly competing with for a wild card spot, so you can't overlook those teams. But obviously facing the Red Sox, Yankees, Rays, Yankees in this stretch over 2 weeks is perhaps the most daunting part of the rest of the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the barometer if nothing else. I mean, this again is a team that looks really good, but they're also about to play the first and second best team in their own division, which could very promptly wrap up any hopes of a postseason. But, as things stand today, I mean, just from afar, it feels like there's been this rejuvenated energy. At the ballpark, do you sense that?
Yeah, I do think you sense it in the ballpark for like in a variety of ways. Like you sense it from the players and from the fans. I do think from a fan perspective, they are like you go to these games at the Rogers Center, they're all sold out. Some of my pals were telling me they were trying to get tickets to go see the Red Sox or the Yankees play, and it's pretty much impossible. So I do think, and now while I do think a lot of these tickets were probably sold well before the season began, just because they were capitalizing on a lot of hype from a run to the World Series last year. I also think that at the same time, fans, especially given what they've seen for most of the season this year, they're just begging the team to give them a reason to hop back on the bandwagon, to believe again, to feel good about the team. I think a lot of people have followed for a long time, and then there's another subsect of fans, no less valid by any means, but kind of jumped on the bandwagon the last couple of years and got to experience something really exciting. So I think all of these people, no matter how long you've been a fan for, I think are just so ready to embrace the Blue Jays, and then they kind of haven't been able to. And now taking 3 or 4 from the Red Sox, I think kind of it's almost like license that hey, you can do that. So you see that energy, I think, on a nightly basis at the Rogers Center. I think as well from a player perspective, they clearly see this and feed on it, right? Like Max Scherzer has mentioned it a number of times. Brett Bateman, a guy. I mean, Scherzer has not been here that long. Bateman has been here even less long, obviously, just a week or so, and I think he's noticed it pretty much right away. He's talked about it before, and then you have all the players who have been here for a really long time that I'm sure when they first got here, they had to get used to it, but are also now seeing what happens when you have the not just the city but the entire country behind you, right, on a regular basis. So yeah, I do think it's funny, right? It almost feeds off each other. The fans feed off the players playing well. The players feed off the fans' energy. It's kind of fun to watch.
I'm glad you mentioned Bateman because that's been, I mean, again, it's been about a week, but that's been really quite the story in the early going. I mean, the numbers for him are not off the page, but it seems like every time there's runners in scoring position, anytime there's a high leverage spot and he's up, it seems like he comes up with a big knock and he's earned the trust clearly of John Schneider. He's getting ABs towards the top of the lineup, led off a couple times. Him and McAdoo as well getting the call, and him coming up and homering in his first game. There's some kind of youth injection or something to this, but I mean, I don't know if I can quite articulate it. I'm wondering if maybe you can.
No, I know what you mean. It does feel like McAdoo certainly to a lesser extent, but Bateman and I mean and Soriano is not exactly like he's a new guy. Maybe I wouldn't quite classify him as like as young necessarily, but he's still relatively young. But still, you're injecting the team with these new presences, and I do think it has given the team some late life. Now, I'm not going to attribute it all to solely Bateman or Soriano, although Soriano being your number two behind Dylan Cease, I think does make you feel pretty good. So I'm looking forward to seeing what fruits that bears down the stretch of the season, certainly just even next week. But I do think you're right that the Bateman, the McAdoo edition, even not just for the team's like scoring results, for example, but just how the camaraderie has changed to a certain extent. I'm not saying that it's all because Dalton Varsho's gone and Jeff Hoffman's gone, but I do think that maybe giving a Miles Straw, who is well liked in the clubhouse, not that Varsho was not, but that Straw who is has his little things with all the various members of the team. It does maybe alter team chemistry in ways that I'm sure not even John Schneider and Ross Atkins really can anticipate, right? And now here you are, you have some young guys being mentored and also producing at the plate. It's pretty exciting to watch. You're right. It's funny because Bateman's stats, to your point, are not exactly going to blow you away, but it's just the way he grinds out there. He's obviously a talented defensive player. He gives you quality ABs. Nathan Lucas it reminds me of that to a certain extent, but from a younger perspective, obviously, it's going to be fascinating to see how they can maybe harness some of this down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would bank on him or McAdoo necessarily being, significant
Right.
contributors down the stretch, but I mean, it would seem that there is some sort of attitude or some sort of swagger or something that, especially with Bateman, that has shown up. And the other thing that I wonder, and it was mentioned by Shai Davidi just the other day on Sportsnet Central. He was doing a post game, and he mentioned that there was kind of this sense of, the deadline has passed, the anxiety that surrounds the deadline has passed, which I also wonder if you attribute that to any of this success of late. Because again, it's been a bit of a longer stretch, 5 series wins in a row, but this Red Sox series, even the Phillies series, right? The way that those two series have really kind of changed the dynamic around the team. I mean, they're 5 games back of 500, but it felt before like they were a million games back, and now it feels like they're almost like over 500 with the way that the atmosphere, the vibe around the team has completely shifted.
I do think that, and Schneider had talked about this, I think, right after the deadline was over, like the day the deadline passed when they were in Houston, right? And I do think it's interesting because one of the things he talked about, we mentioned already, the idea that if these are the guys you're going to go to war with for the rest of the season, it just allows you to put a time that's very chaotic in your rear view. And I've heard a lot of people say this in a lot of different sports. I've heard many NHL players say this in the locker rooms. I've heard NBA players say this as well. And I'm not surprised to hear it's no different in Major League Baseball because I'm sure for a lot of people, especially for those who their names are in the trade rumors. I'm sure it just comes as a relief to like not have to worry about, hey, where am I gonna go to bed in a week, right? What do I have to tell my wife and my kids about what we're doing going forward, right? So I'm sure that aspect of it not having to be in the back of your mind maybe does allow you to play a little freer. I think for a lot of us, you might hear that, right? You might think to yourself, hey, well, how much could that really matter? But I do think for a lot of these players where you're just thinking about that 24/7 until the deadline actually passes, it probably comes as a bit of a relief. So that this is the team they have moving forward probably does allow them to really like, hunker down, bear down, and be able to look forward to the rest of the season and say, all right, this is what we got. Starting today, Friday, August 14th, they have 39 games left, and these are the guys we're going to do battle with in these last 39 games. I got to think that helps.
So I want to dig into the series a little bit. I mean, starting on Monday, they pull off the 2-1 series, excuse me, the 2-1 win. Tuesdays, there's, of course, the big comeback, kind of showing some fight. And then obviously Wednesday, they come away with a 6-4 win. I mean, the offense kind of showing up, but by and large, the pitching has really kind of defined this stretch. I mean, do you feel that this is just the pathway to win for this team is going to be the pitching is going to have to be just pristine?
I mean, it kind of has to be if the bats aren't going to be producing ultra regularly, right? I mean, overall, I think I forget all the numbers in front of me, but going into the Red Sox series finale, the Blue Jays, I think, since in their 5 series wins since the end of July, they have like the third best ERA in all of baseball, which is incredible. And at the same time, it's the WRC plus, the OPS, the home runs are all in the mid to low 20s. So it's kind of one of those things where, they're just finding ways to win by the slimmest of margins, led by the pitching, whether it is starting pitching, whether it's the bullpen. And now I know yesterday, we can quibble with the Chase Lee thing, but at the same time, it was until that point a pretty well pitched game. I mean, Max Scherzer, once again, I thought looked pretty good, all things considered, even if it was somewhat abbreviated. Maybe he got squeezed by a couple of pitches here and there that didn't necessarily help out his pitch count. I mean, Dylan Cease and Jose Soriano, not much, there's a lot to say on them just because they've been so damn good. And now we'll see if they can keep it up with the Shane Biebers of the world. There's going to be a bullpen day in there where you expect, I'm guessing, Simeon Woods Richardson to take at least a bulk of that responsibility. I mean, you're going to get Cease again at the very least for the end of the Yankees series here at the Rogers Center. So Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see if they can keep it up because you know like there's probably only so much you can ask the starting pitchers to do if they're only gonna get like one or two runs of support every single game. So it would be nice for the team to like break out offensively in some way. And I know to start the Yankee series, Garrett Cole is a somewhat tough ask, but hey, I mean, look, all things considered, they've gotten one end of it with the pitching. You hope it can keep up with the bullpen and the offense certainly on the other side.
Right. I mean, you go through the games. Game one, Jameson Taillon pitches well, although ultimately leaves with injury, and we'll get into that in just a moment here. Game two, Dylan Cease, almost like an uncharacteristically bad start, and still like 3 runs, 7 punch outs is still a pretty good outing for most guys. And then Soriano continues to have success in his early tenure as a Blue Jay. I want to ask you a little bit about him because we've seen him twice now. Saw him obviously in his home debut just the other day. You alluded to it earlier, but what are your early impressions of him?
I've loved watching him, honestly. He's been so much fun to watch. I was a big fan of his, maybe because of fantasy baseball, but I've had him in my on my team for a couple of years. So I was thrilled to see the acquisition because this is a guy who has some really nasty stuff. It was interesting seeing how his his pitch mix had changed to a certain extent as an Angel from last year to this year. It almost felt like the Angels were really trying to get him to throw more pitches for strikeouts, right? Like they were looked like they were trying to harness that four seamer instead of the two seamer maybe as much because they wanted him to get more strikeout numbers instead of putting the ball on the ground as much as he does, which obviously he's really good at. But it was interesting because so he that was the change for the Angels from 25 to 26. And then he gets traded to the Blue Jays. Obviously, doesn't pitch in 12 days until he pitches against the Phillies. And then against the Phillies, and John Schneider had talked about this a couple days ago before his most recent start at home. But the idea that while some of it this was Phillies dependent because they identified some things as attacking the Phillies specifically with, but they did want to go back to the 2025 version of Jose Soriano. The idea that they wanted him to throw that knuckle curve, which perhaps is not a true knuckle curve, but still a knuckle curve along with that sinker. And not that they eliminated the four seamer, but that they went a little bit less towards that pitch and more back towards the sinker. And then you kind of saw that continue to a certain extent on against the Red Sox this past week, right? So I'm sure they love to have Pete Walker get him in the pitching lab and sprinkle that Pete Walker magic dust on him to kind of find his best form. But I do think as well that his stuff looks really nasty. He was locked in. I know he gave up the home run, but I think as he continues to spend more and more and more time with John Schneider and Walker and the Blue Jays front office, I think they're going to unlock something special there. I also am curious to see, and this might be an off-season thing, but I'm curious to see what the contract for him looks like, right? Because he only had, like, you sent one of your bigger prospects away, and he, like, quote unquote, only has, I guess, 2 years of control remaining. So presumably this will end up like the Barrios thing, where he was traded here, he played out that year, then he signed a fat extension. I'm guessing it'll be something similar to that, but yeah, curious to see what that looks like as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably likely. Obviously, there's the 2027 elephant
Right,
in the
right.
room of the lockout, but even to that point, I would still expect that they're likely going to invest a lot into Soriano just because of the prospect allocation that it took to get him. I think the thing that's also really interesting is in the early goings, the pitch mix stuff, and again, you mentioned it a little bit, but the knuckle curve has really kind of just become more pronounced as kind of his pitch. They've shuffled his pitch mix just generally around. And the early returns, it seems like, are working. Like this does look like a guy that's going to potentially be a really good number two behind arguably the best number one in the league right now, if you want to talk Dylan Cease, given that he's pretty much, if not the Cy Young favorite, then probably number two.
Yeah, I would say at worst number two. It's too bad we're with the Yankees in town this weekend. It's probably likely. I think it lines up to have Schlittler pitch against the bullpen day, and I think Cease goes in the series finale. So I'm not sure if it's going to get rejigged or not. Probably not this close out this soon out. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating run for Cease down the stretch. I mean, he continues to lower his ERA. I know he didn't have the most like the finest command in his most recent start, but at the same time, he's been so nasty that, even the smallest bumps seem a little more magnified. But I mean, it's funny to think that the Dylan Cease experience has been more or less exactly what we anticipated it to be, right? Early on, there were some command issues, but I think the hope was that over a long contract, he and Pete Walker, much like the Soriano conversation, would figure something out when it comes to his command and just the way he attacks batters, right? Schneider's talked about this before, and I've always enjoyed hearing him say something along these lines that, Dylan Cease has always felt like he has to be really fine with how he attacks batters. Like he always has to give the his very first pitch to the first batter he sees has to be his best stuff. And like, part of it is working with Cease to make him realize that it's not only about, and it's not that he was reticent to do this is what they were saying, but I think it was more, you're an attack dog and your mentality is attack, attack, attack all the time. And I think they're working with him, whether it's Pete Walker, whether it's both or either, Kirk or Valenzuela, getting him to realize that you can sequence things in a different way. You can lull guys. I think we're to sleep. I think you're also seeing in the last couple of starts, he's playing with the velo to a certain extent. Because I had thought perhaps that maybe the velo fluctuations were, like much like Kevin Gausman sometimes had, like, maybe it took him a little while to ramp up. And I'm sure in some cases that's just all it is. But now that it's happened 3 or 4 times, I kind of, and I think that some people have asked him about this, and he's somewhat tacitly confirmed it that he's kind of playing around with the velos to a certain extent to have batters more in a yo-yo, which I'm sure has only helped him and been more frustrating to swing at if you're a batter. So yeah, he's so much fun to watch, right? I mean, you're gonna get to watch him for the next 6 years after this one. So yeah, I hope hope everyone's ready to watch what by the end of his Blue Jays tenure, you might be watching one of the best Blue Jays pitchers in franchise history, essentially.
Yeah, certainly a possibility. While we're on the topic of the pitching, I think it's worth acknowledging that it has not all been good news of late. Obviously, we get the Jameson Taillon news of forearm tightness, I believe it was, so he hits the injured list. And more significantly, Trey Savage, we get news after him leaving against the Phillies over the weekend, I believe it was, a meniscus injury, although not ruled out for the season. But still, the Blue Jays pitching depth being tested here. I mean, any kind of not concern, I don't know if that's necessarily how I'd phrase it, but like, can they ultimately withstand this storm? Because I mean, they're already going thin. They already dealt away Kevin Gausman. They've already now lost Ione, and now Trey Savage out. We're talking about bullpen days. How possible is it to sustain this?
Yeah, I guess the rotation now is in some order: Cease, Soriano, Bieber, Scherzer, bullpen day, essentially, right? And if that's the case, then I think you can make do depending on how things fall. And I think they've been smart to try and split some of it up. Like they have the bullpen day, and I mean, not I'm sure this is not necessarily intentional, but they have the bullpen day in between Bieber and Cease. Now, again, that could be really good if Bieber and Cease are going 6 2/3 kind of thing. It could also be really bad if Bieber is only going, 4 innings or 4 1/3, and you have a bullpen day the next day. So curious to see what that looks like at the very least against a Yankees team that even without Judge still can be pretty dangerous, all things considered, right? So very interested to see that. But yeah, I think because I think we're talking about this in the context of like a playoff series, for example. Let's assume they can make it to a playoff series and that Savage is not a factor because I do think you have to think about the player first. It's not you don't want to rush him back and have that be a worse issue going into next year. And again, I know next year we don't know if there's going to be baseball, but let's say there is. You just don't want that to be a complicating factor for a guy that you think is a huge part of your rotation for years to come, right? So if you're not going to rush Savage back this year, at the very least, going into a 3-game playoff series, you have for sure Cease Soriano and then one of Bieber Scherzer. I mean, I feel okay about that. Certainly, that third game might get a little dicey, but I mean, if you're Cease and Soriano, you're 1-2. I feel as good about Cease and Soriano in a 3-game playoff series as I think any team should feel. But at the same time, if we're not talking about playoffs, you're talking about the Blue Jays' ability to ride their rotation into the playoffs in the first place, that I'm not saying it's dicey, but I do think it's a little in a longer sample size where things have there's more of an ability for things to go wrong. I do think that could be it could be somewhat of a problem if like even one guy can't give you what you're looking for. The cascading effect down the bullpen can be a little ruinous just because I mean look the bullpen has been I think the bullpen has been really good since the end of July, but I mean how long can you keep that up for if you're not getting long starts? And I think they've been good that they have been getting that. But again, Bieber is a big part of this. Are you going to get the Bieber that goes 6 innings? Or are you going to get the Bieber that walks a ton of guys? It does feel like a little more volatile if that makes sense.
So, show we've talked some pitching, we talked some hitting. I think the last place kind of to look here is the, the outlook for the 39 games remaining. They are 59 and 64, so they can max out at about what? No math guy here, but they can max out, I think, here at just under 100 wins. They will not be going 39 and 0. I think that much is obvious. But how many wins do you think that the Jays are ultimately going to have to wind up with here if they do hope to make the postseason?
Okay, well, we're doing something dangerous here, which is math on the fly for me. So I'll rely on you for the math, but uh, I would think.
Well, here. Let me help you out a little bit here.
Okay.
Right now, the Detroit Tigers hold the final wild card spot. They are 60 and 61.
Oof.
The Rangers are a half game. I know it's a mess in the American League to say the least. Which, listen, it's gonna help the Blue Jays. They're not gonna have to win 95 plus games to end
No,
up in a
no, no.
wild card spot. But are we talking 500? Can they sneak in with like 81 wins? Are we talking, they're gonna have to go 30 and 9, and that'll get them to 89 wins. And that's a tough task, but is that
Yeah.
even shooting for the moon?
Okay, so what would get them what's the win-loss record that would get them to 83 wins?
83 wins, that would be, if my math here is correct, I believe that would be 24 and 15,
Right, because what
which
are the Jays
is
right now? They're 59 and
they're
64, right? Yeah,
59 and
so
64. So,
yeah.
not impossible, but 24 and 15 is again, I'm no math whiz, but that's got to be like 110 win pace over a 162. So they would have to get ripping hot, even hotter than they arguably are now,
Yeah.
but
I mean, because what they're 10 and 4, or I guess 10 and 5 now. 10 and 5 in their last 15. There was a stretch where they were 17 and 14. If you go back a little further. So I do think, look, if you play to that, I don't think you have to be if you find somewhere in the middle of 10 and 5 and 17 and 14 pace, then you probably can get to 82, 83 wins. I think probably. Now things have no question things have to go your way, and you have to play better baseball than you had been playing for the majority of the season. If you find something in this 15 game stretch that you can carry forward, that I do think is doable. But yeah, I do think that, and I mean, I think 83 wins would get you in for sure into the final wild card spot. I gotta say this too. I don't think the Red Sox are. I think that giant monster stretch where they went like 32 and 7, which is just absurd. That probably will be enough to get them into the playoffs, but they're not that far up on the third wild card, even with that monster run. So they can't afford too many 5 game losing streaks like they just had prior to the win in the series finale against the Blue Jays. So I think it's doable. And now that they have less teams, because some of these teams have really fallen out. Like I mean, the Mariners have been absolutely wretched in the last month or so. So they might be done. Although again, things are to your point, things are so mid in the American League that even they are not completely out of it. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting because so many teams are jumbled up together. I think the other interesting part will be tiebreakers, right? Because you want the Blue Jays to occupy that third wildcard spot, and you want them to win enough to have it outright, but you also don't want the other teams to fall into this chaotic quagmire where they are tied with the Blue Jays. Because I think I could be wrong. I think at the very least right now, You're not going to have the tiebreaker against, I don't think the Astros or the Rangers. I think the Twins and Tigers might be in that same boat. At the very least, it depends on some series down the stretch of the season. But yeah, like the tiebreaker could play a huge factor here in who does and does not make the playoffs because you already did not play well against these teams earlier in the season. So the solution would be to just win as many games as humanly possible outright. But as you said, that's a dicey proposition sometimes.
Yeah, I think it was a quote from Strider. I have it here. I don't have the full quote, but he mentioned something along the lines of having to go full send at the
Yes.
moment. There was that, and there was another quote about the baseball gods that also I have written down just as a couple of winners from him. Yeah, it's not going to be easy, and they're gonna have to kind of have to throw caution to the wind. So the series coming up, they've got the Yankees obviously this weekend, and then you've got Tampa on the road and the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. Let's kind of focus in on this Yankees series just very quickly just to kind of wrap things up here, kind of a bit of a look ahead. Can they win this series given how they've been playing lately, and obviously the Titanic team that the Yankees can be, but more kind of pertinent is what do they have to get out of this series to continue to look like they're headed down the right path?
It's a good question because I don't think like I would think that even if you lose two of three to the Yankees, that's not a death knell on the season, given how close you are in the wild card and given that these other teams are all playing each other as well. But at the same time, you don't want to like you can't really afford too many missteps because of the hole you've put yourself in if you're the Blue Jays. So, I think sentiment will understandably be down if they lose two of three to the Yankees. At the same time, I think they could win two of three against the Yankees, no question. I mean, Cam Schlittler, Garrett Cole being at least two of the three. I'm not sure if Ryan Weathers is the other guy that's going in the rotation this weekend for the Yankees. I think he's been fine to good at times, although he's had kind of an up and down season. I think depending on his opponent, including the Blue Jays. Let's face it, he has not been great against the Jays in his one start against them this season. So curious to see what that looks like. But I mean, even with Cole and Schlittler taking two of those three starts, I think like they're not perfect, right? They're beatable guys, even if they are very, very talented pitchers, no question. But it will require more of the same, right? It'll require staying patient. It'll require, you know, not helping the pitcher out when you swing all the time and early on. I think sometimes they could take a pitch or two, and I find it's an interesting balance, right? Because sometimes other pitchers will throw one right down the middle, and then they'll take, and you think, God, if that's the one you want to swing on, but at the same time, if that pitch comes early in the pitch count, you want them to swing on it, but sometimes it ends as a flyout or a ground out, for example, right? So it's a tough job of an MLB hitter, and it's tough for us to judge it like that. It's on such a fine AB by AB basis, but. I don't think the Yankees are perfect. I mean, they still don't have Aaron Judge on the other side of things. I mean, I have been relatively impressed by the job some of the younger guys for the Yankees are doing, like a George Lombard Jr. or Spencer Jones. Ben Rice he's a fascinating guy because he had a monster first half of the season, and then he's had an all right second half to a certain extent. So, but he's still a guy who could sock a home run in any given AB because he's that kind of guy. So it's not as though the Yankees are bereft of threats without Aaron Judge. And then there's the regular guys like the Jazz Chisholm Juniors and the Jose Caballeros, who's always a pest, no matter who he's playing against. That's been a fun baseball conversation with the pitch clock and so on. But the Yankees are certainly beatable. I do think the series that it's not really concerned about, but the series that I do think has a chance to go awry is the Rays series, only because it's in Tampa at the Trop, and the Rays, last I checked, had gone on like a 9-game winning streak. Like of all the teams in the American League, I think the Rays are the team that concern me the most, even if the American League top to bottom is, somewhat mid, as we've talked about.
Yeah, we've had a few episodes in the history of this podcast where we've kind of described them as the week to save the season, and I think the week ahead, not necessarily to save the season, but I think we're going to learn a lot in the week ahead show. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join the pod today. Obviously, battled through some technical difficulties off air, but really appreciate you taking the time. And a joy as always to be joined by you, for you to join to share your ball knowledge is always a thrill. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, anytime, man.
That is going to do it here for us today, the Bird's Eye View podcast. Want to thank you very much for listening. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. You can find us there at the Bird's Eye View podcast. If you're listening along on the audio provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow all of us on Twitter. I am out Jori Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BEV_pod. And Zach, who is not with us today, is at Worden_Zach. Thanks so much for listening.